The waves crashed against the hull, a relentless rhythm. Rain lashed the deck. Wind howled, a desperate lament. Below, the thrum of the engine vibrated through the metal. 12 souls huddled in the cramped quarters, their faces stark with fear and defiant hope. Rear Admiral Shirin Shahbazi gripped the tarnished silver locket under her uniform. This was the night. This was their final stand. Rear Admiral Shirin Shahbazi had always moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Her movements were economical, her gaze unwavering, her voice a low, steady current that commanded immediate attention. For 48 years, every breath she took, every decision she made, was in service to the Islamic Republic. She was Daryaban Shirin Shahbazi, a legend in the IRGC Navy, the first woman to command a strategic naval base near Bandar Abbas. Her flotilla of patrol vessels, the swift and deadly Hendijan-class boats, was her lifeblood. She knew every bolt, every circuit, every crew member on site. Her name was whispered with respect, even awe, among the rank and file. They called her the Sea Lioness. Born and raised in Bandar Abbas, the hot, humid air of the Persian Gulf port city was in her bones. The scent of salt and diesel, the cries of gulls, the distant thrum of ships leaving the Strait of Hormuz. These were the lullabies of her childhood. Her family, originally from the historic Minab region, had always looked to the sea. Her father had served in the Imperial Iranian Navy, a career cut short by the revolution. But his love for the sea, for the vessels that guarded Iran's coast, had been passed down. Shirin absorbed it like the desert absorbs rain. When the new Islamic Republic announced its own naval forces, emphasizing spiritual purity and revolutionary zeal, Shirin, a fiery, intelligent young woman, saw her destiny. This was a chance to serve a higher purpose, to protect Iran from the Tagut, the corrupting Western influence that had, she believed, weakened their nation. Her husband, Reza, a brilliant young officer, had shared her conviction. They met at the Naval Academy, a rare institution then, that admitted women, albeit with strict conditions. They bonded over long nights studying naval strategy, their shared devotion to Islam, and their fierce patriotism. Their love was intertwined with their mission. They believed they were building a stronger, purer Iran, free from external meddling. When Reza died a martyr in a naval skirmish with an aggressive foreign vessel years ago, Shirin's resolve only hardened. His sacrifice fueled her, cementing her commitment. She wore her widowhood like a badge of honor, a silent vow to continue their shared fight. Their daughter, Zara, just a toddler then, became a living legacy. Shirin had poured all her love, all her aspirations, into Zara. She wanted Zara to grow up in a truly independent, glorious Iran. The base near Bandar Abbas was Shirin's domain. It was a sprawling complex of weathered concrete buildings, sun-baked tarmac, and piers stretching into the shimmering Gulf waters. She knew the rhythm of the place, the pre-dawn calls to prayer echoing across the barracks, the clang of tools from the repair docks, the roar of engines as patrol boats sped out on maneuvers. She oversaw everything with meticulous detail. She believed in efficiency, in unwavering discipline, in the righteousness of their cause. The enemy, she taught her officers, was insidious, always seeking to undermine Iran's sovereignty, to exploit its resources, to corrupt its people. They, the IRGC Navy, were the shield. They were the sword. She spent countless hours in the command center, a dimly lit room filled with the soft glow of radar screens and the hushed voices of navigators. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and electronic ozone. Maps covered entire walls, charting every vessel, every possible threat in the strait. She understood the geopolitical chessboard, the constant dance of power in one of the world's most critical waterways. Every decision, she believed, was a strategic move to safeguard Iran. She read the Quran every night, seeking guidance, reinforcing her conviction. Her faith was not a passive belief. It was an active force, driving her forward, justifying every harsh order, every sleepless night. Life at the base was strict, ascetic. The officers, many young men and women barely out of their teens, looked up to her. She was a living embodiment of the revolution's promise, a woman of power, respected, feared, and utterly devoted. She pushed them hard, drilling them in tactical maneuvers, in weapon systems, in the ideological principles of the Islamic Republic. "We are the guardians," she would tell them, her voice resonating with conviction. Our vigilance ensures the purity of our nation. There is no compromise in this fight. She truly believed it. She saw every hardship, every sacrifice, every act of suppression against perceived internal dissent as a necessary step to protect the greater good. The state's narrative was her narrative. The state's enemies were her enemies. Sometimes, late at night, in her Spartan living quarters on the base, she would trace the lines of Zara's face in a faded photograph. Zara, now 22, was studying abroad in Canada. Shirin had arranged for her to leave years ago, ostensibly for a better education than could be found in Iran's constrained universities. But privately, deep down, a mother's instinct had whispered of a different motive, a desire for Zara to experience a world without the omnipresent restrictions, the constant surveillance, the suffocating ideological conformity. She missed Zara terribly. Their video calls were her only connection to a softer, more personal world. She would tell Zara about her work, about the importance of their mission, always carefully omitting the harsher realities. Zara, polite and loving, would listen, sometimes asking difficult questions about freedom and human rights, questions Shirin would deftly deflect, attributing them to Western propaganda. Shirin told herself she was sending Zara to gather knowledge, to bring it back to a strong Iran. She never considered that Zara might not want to return. She certainly never considered that Zara's safety might eventually become the very thing that broke her own loyalty. She believed in the order, the discipline, the unwavering resolve of the system she served. The constant struggle against perceived enemies, both internal and external, was simply the price of true independence. She had seen men and women dedicate their lives, sacrifice everything, for this vision. She was one of them. The Daryaban knew her place, her purpose. She was the sea lioness, guarding the gates of Iran. Nothing could shake that conviction, or so she thought. The order arrived on a blistering July afternoon, the air heavy and still, pressing down on the base like a physical weight. Shirin was in her office reviewing patrol logs, the fan barely stirring the humid air. Her communication officer, a young, nervous lieutenant named Abbas, entered, his face pale. He held a sealed envelope, its crimson wax seal bearing the distinctive insignia of the Supreme National Security Council. Abbas rarely showed emotion. This was different. Shirin felt a chill snake up her spine despite the oppressive heat. She took the envelope. Its weight felt ominous. She broke the seal with a precise, measured movement. The words inside were stark, concise. Her flotilla, specifically the Hendijan-class patrol boat, Kosar 14Rs, was to intercept a civilian fishing trawler, the Mahi Gara. The trawler was suspected of smuggling dissidents and seditious materials out of the country, possibly coordinating with foreign elements. The order, signed by a high-ranking Ministry of Intelligence and Security official, stated explicitly, "Neutralize threat, ensure no survivors, send a message." Shirin's jaw tightened. Neutralize threat was standard military parlance. No survivors was not. This was an execution order. Her mind immediately flashed to her training. Rules of engagement, proportionality. But the Revolutionary Guard operated under its own unique code. Revolutionary justice. She had given such orders before, always against what she genuinely believed were clear and present dangers to the state. Smugglers of drugs, weapons, foreign agents. But dissidents? This felt different. A cold knot formed in her stomach. She stared at the paper. The words seemed to writhe on the page. She called Captain Mahmoud, her second in command, a gruff, reliable man whose loyalty was beyond question. He had served under her for 15 years. He entered, saluted sharply, his face unreadable. Shirin handed him the order. Mahmoud read it, his eyes narrowing. He looked up at her. His expression was a carefully blank canvas, but Shirin could read the subtle tension around his mouth. "Admiral?" he asked, his voice low, a question more than an acknowledgement. "Prepare the Kosar 14, she commanded, her voice betraying none of her inner turmoil. "Full complement. Armaments ready. We depart at 0300. I will be on board." Mahmoud nodded, saluted, and left. He did not question. He would never question. That was his strength. And now, perhaps, her weakness. The night air was thick with humidity as the Kosar 14 cut through the dark waters. The engines thrummed. The radar screen glowed a sickly green. tracking the small blip of the Mahi Gera. Shirin stood on the bridge, the night wind whipping at her uniform, the locket under her collar pressing against her skin. The scent of diesel and sea spray filled the air. She gripped the cold metal railing, her knuckles white. Mahmoud stood beside her, his silhouette a silent sentinel. The young radar operator, Amir, barely 20 years old, spoke in hushed tones, relaying target bearings. Target acquired, Admiral, visible on thermal. Shirin raised her binoculars. The Mahi Gera was a typical Gulf fishing trawler, small, low in the water, its silhouette unremarkable against the starlit horizon. A single light burned on its mast. She could make out figures on the deck, many figures, too many for a fishing crew. Her heart pounded a heavy, uneven rhythm. "Approach to 100 meters, she ordered. Her voice was steady, betraying nothing. As they closed the distance, the details became clearer. These were not hardened criminals. These were families, men, women, even children. Their faces, illuminated by the Kozar 14-team searchlight, were etched with desperation, fear, and a bone-deep weariness. They huddled together, clutching bundles, their eyes wide like hunted animals. Shirin swept her binoculars across the deck, and then she saw her. A young girl, no older than Zara, maybe 20, 21. Her hair was uncovered, wild in the wind. Her eyes were wide, terrified, staring directly into the searchlight, directly at Shirin. Her face was pale, thin but undeniably beautiful, framed by dark, wind-tossed hair. She clutched a smaller child, a boy, perhaps 6 or 7, who buried his face in her side. Shirin's breath hitched. The girl looked so much like Zara. The same wide, dark eyes, the same delicate jawline, the same terror-stricken innocence. The girl's lips moved, forming silent words, a desperate plea. The words of the order echoed in Shirin's head. Ensure no survivors. Send a message. This wasn't about national security. This wasn't about protecting Iran from external enemies. This was about silencing dissent, about crushing hope, about terrorizing its own people. This was murder, cold, calculated. And she, Shirin Shahbazi, the sea lioness, was about to execute it. Her hand trembled slightly, imperceptibly. The locket beneath her uniform felt suddenly heavy, like a stone. She closed her eyes for a brief, agonizing moment. The image of Zara, smiling in their last video call, overlaid with the terrified face of the girl on the trawler. Two faces, separated by an impossible gulf, yet linked by a mother's fear. "Admiral?" Mahmoud's voice was a low rumble beside her. The crew waited, their faces grim, their hands hovering over the weapons controls. Shirin opened her eyes. The girl was still there, still staring, still begging. The small boy clung to her. The wind howled, carrying the faint, distant sound of their desperate cries. Shirin raised her hand. "Fire," she said, the single word ripping through her. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. The deck of the Kozar 14 main shuddered as the 20mm cannon roared. Tracers arced through the night. The fishing trawler erupted in a shower of sparks and splintering wood. Screams, sharp and piercing, tore through the night. The Mahi Gera pitched violently, then slowly began to list, smoke billowing from its mangled hull. Shirin watched, numb, as the small vessel slipped beneath the waves. The searchlight played over the churning water, revealing only debris and darkness. No survivors. She had obeyed. She had sent the message, and in doing so, she had sunk her own soul. The image seared itself into Shirin's mind. The girl's face, Zara's face, the screams, the burning trawler. It replayed endlessly, a silent, horrifying loop in the darkness behind her eyes. Back in her quarters, the stale air felt suffocating. She tore at her uniform, pulling the heavy fabric away from her throat, gasping for air that wouldn't come. The silver locket, damp with sweat, burned against her skin. She fumbled with the clasp, wrenching it open. Inside, the faded photograph. A young, beaming Shirin, Reza's arm around her. A tiny Zara gurgling in her lap. Taken years ago, before the full weight of the revolution had settled. Before the sacrifices had begun to demand such a monstrous price. She stared at the innocent faces. This was the family she had sworn to protect. This was the nation she had served. But what nation demanded the murder of its own desperate citizens? What protection was this? The carefully constructed edifice of her belief, painstakingly built over decades, crumbled around her. It wasn't a sudden, explosive collapse. It was a slow, agonizing disintegration, like rock weathering under relentless waves. Every justification, every ideological tenet, every rallying cry for purity and sovereignty now sounded hollow, utterly cynical. She had believed in the divine mandate. She had believed in a moral fight against corrupting influences. She had believed in the absolute righteousness of the Islamic Republic's power. But the girl's face had exposed the lie. This regime was not protecting Iran. It was consuming it. It was feeding on its own children. Her stomach roiled. She stumbled to the small, cold sink, retching violently until there was nothing left but bile. The metallic tang burned her throat. For 30 years, she had worn the uniform with pride, a symbol of unwavering loyalty. Now it felt like a shroud. The weight of the stars on her shoulder, the polished buttons, the crisp fabric, all of it felt like chains. She had always dismissed whispers of corruption, of oppression, as the propaganda of foreign enemies or the whining of traitors. She had seen the protests, the disturbances, but had always rationalized them as the foolish actions of a misguided minority, manipulated by outside forces. She had commanded her forces to disperse them, believing she was enforcing order, protecting the very fabric of society. But what if they were right? What if the regime itself had become the true enemy of Iran? The thought was blasphemy. It was treason. It was the deepest heresy against everything she had ever dedicated her life to. Yet, the question gnawed at her, sharp and relentless. The fear in that girl's eyes. It was not the fear of an ideological opponent. It was the fear of a desperate human being, seeking only escape, seeking only a chance at life, just like Zara would seek if she were trapped here. A profound, sickening realization washed over her. She had been a tool, a highly efficient, decorated tool. She had been complicit in atrocities she had always told herself were necessary, justifiable. She had executed orders that were, at their core, barbaric. Her unwavering loyalty had blinded her. Her faith had been weaponized against her own conscience. The memory of Reza, her martyred husband, came to her. Would he have approved of this? Would his sacrifice truly be honored by such an act? She doubted it. She doubted everything. The silence of her room was deafening. Even the distant sounds of the bass, the clatter of a truck, the shouted command, seemed muffled, unreal. She stared at her reflection in the darkened window. A stranger looked back, a woman with hollow eyes, lines of despair etched around her mouth. This was not the sea lioness. This was a broken woman, drowning in guilt. She thought of Zara. What if Zara had stayed? What if Zara, with her bright mind and questioning spirit, had become one of those dissidents? What if Shirin herself had been ordered to neutralize her own daughter? The thought was a physical blow, a punch to her gut. She sank onto her cot, burying her face in her hands, her body shaking with silent sobs. She had to protect Zara. She had to ensure Zara never had to face such a choice, never had to live under such a brutal, hypocritical regime. This was no longer about Iran. It was about pure, primal, maternal instinct. The next few days passed in a blur of hollow routine. Shirin moved through her duties mechanically, issuing commands, attending meetings, her face a mask of weary efficiency. But internally, a storm raged. The decision had been made, solidified in the agonizing hours after the Mahi Gera sank. She had to leave. She had to break free. And she would not leave alone. She could not. The weight of her past actions demanded more. She needed to save others, however few, to atone, in some small way, for the lives she had taken, for the system she had upheld. She began to observe her crew more closely, scrutinizing their faces during general briefings, listening to their hushed conversations in the mess hall. She looked for the same flicker of doubt, the same shadow of disillusionment that now consumed her. She found it in the eyes of the young, newly assigned officers, in the tired sighs of the seasoned engineers, in the subtle, rebellious glances when orders came down that seemed particularly arbitrary or cruel. Captain Mahmoud, her second in command, was the first she approached. He was stoic, loyal, but Shirin had seen the tension around his eyes during the Mahi Geras incident. She called him to her office late one night. The air conditioning hummed, a lonely sound. "Mahmoud," she began, her voice low. "Do you remember the trawler?" He stiffened, his eyes meeting hers. He nodded once. That order was wrong, she stated, her gaze unwavering. Mahmoud's breath hitched, a faint, almost imperceptible sound. He said nothing, but his silence was louder than any words. Shirin pressed on, revealing fragments of her torment, her disillusionment. She spoke of the hypocrisy, the lies, the fear. She watched his face for any sign of rejection, of denunciation. Instead, she saw a profound sadness, a confirmation of his own unspoken doubts. "Admiral," he finally whispered, his voice hoarse, "I have seen enough. My brother, he was arrested last year for simply speaking his mind in a cafe. He is still in Evan. They say he is a foreign agent. His eyes were distant, haunted. I believe you. This path is no longer righteous." His confession was the breakthrough. With Mahmoud as her confidant, Shirin began her meticulous selection. She chose 10 others, young navigators, brilliant engineers, quiet communication specialists. They were men and women who had shown subtle signs of unease, a flicker of humanity in an increasingly dehumanizing system. Some had family members disappeared. Others had seen firsthand the brutal suppression of protests in Tehran or Isfahan. Each had their own private reason to doubt, but no one had dared voice it. She spoke to each of them individually, late at night, in hushed tones, testing their resolve, probing their commitment to a different future. She spoke of freedom, of truth, of a future for Iran that wasn't built on lies and fear. She spoke of her daughter, Zara, and the world she wished for her. The plan began to take shape, born from Shirin's intimate knowledge of the base, its protocols, its blind spots. Their escape vessel would be the Kausar 14 mine itself, the very boat that had sunk the trawler. It was undergoing routine maintenance, designated as disabled for a week, docked in a less monitored section of the pier. This gave them a window. She would feign a critical sea trial to test a newly installed engine component, needing a skeleton crew and restricted communications for security protocols. This would buy them precious hours before their absence was noted. The crucial element was the scuttling. They couldn't simply sail away in an IRGC patrol boat. It would trigger an immediate, overwhelming pursuit. The boat had to disappear. Shirin devised a system, strategically placed charges, set to detonate remotely after they had transferred to another vessel. The other vessel was Mahmoud's contact, an old fisherman, a distant cousin, who secretly despised the regime and ran a small, illicit operation ferrying goods, and occasionally people, across the Gulf. He would be waiting in international waters, disguised as a commercial trawler. The symbolic object, her locket, now became her anchor, a tangible reminder of her purpose. It was not just about Zara. It was about the innocent faces on the Mahi Gera. It was about the dream of a truer Iran. The risk was unimaginable. Discovery meant execution, a public denouncement, a final brutal message. But the alternative, remaining a complicit cog in a machine she now loathed, was a fate worse than death. The Sea Lioness would sink her own ship, not in defeat, but in a desperate, defiant act of liberation. The night of the escape descended like a heavy, suffocating shroud over Bandar Abbas. It was a moonless night, the stars obscured by a thick, humid haze. A light, persistent drizzle began to fall, turning the concrete piers slick and gleaming under the sparse sodium lights. The air was thick with the smell of brine, diesel, and a nervous tension that was almost palpable. Shirin, dressed in her standard naval uniform, the weight of her rank insignia feeling like a brand, moved through the deserted corridors of the base. Every shadow seemed to hold a hidden guard. Every distant sound, a siren. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat. At 0200, she rendezvoused with Mahmoud and the 10 selected crew members in a dusty, dimly lit storage room near the docks. The air was thick with the smell of old rope and stagnant water. Their faces, illuminated by the beam of a single tactical flashlight, were pale, etched with a mixture of fear and grim determination. Shirin looked at each of them. Young faces, some barely out of their teens, their eyes wide and nervous. Captain Mahmoud stood stoically beside her, his hand resting on the hilt of his service pistol. "Remember the plan?" Shirin whispered, her voice a low, steady current, deliberately calm. "We are conducting a classified sea trial. Communications will be restricted. No questions, no deviations. Any deviation jeopardizes all of us." She met each gaze, holding it. imbuing them with her resolve. We are doing this for Iran, for a true Iran, for our children. She tapped the locket under her uniform. For their future. They moved like ghosts through the base, their footsteps muffled by the drizzle. The Kausar 14 sat dormant at Pier 7, a dark, silent hulk against the shimmering water. The faint glow of a work light marked the entrance to its engine room. A staged maintenance crew, two of their own, already inside, silently disabling surveillance cameras in that section. Shirin nodded to the armed guard at the gangplank, a young Basiji recruit who barely registered her presence, accustomed to her late-night inspections. "Evening, Daryaban," he mumbled, saluting half-heartedly. "Routine sea trial, boy," she stated, her voice clipped, authoritative. "New engine calibration." The guard simply nodded, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He didn't question an admiral. They boarded the boat, the metal gangplank clanging softly under their weight. Inside, the Kausar 14-1 felt different. Not a vessel of state power, but a fragile shell, a temporary haven. Shirin headed straight for the bridge. Mahmoud moved to the engine room, overseeing the final pre-departure checks. The 10 crew members dispersed to their stations, their movements precise, practiced, yet underscored by a desperate urgency. Navigation. Plot course 270 degrees. Maintain 2 knots until clear of the breakwater, Shirin ordered, her voice firm. Comms. Restrict all outgoing except for routine engine telemetry. Internal only. The engines rumbled to life, a deep, reassuring vibration that spread through the deck. The Kausar 14-1 slowly pulled away from the pier, churning the dark water. The lights of Bandar Abbas receded into the haze, blurring into indistinct glow. The drizzle became a heavy rain, obscuring visibility, a blessing and a curse. Shirin stood at the helm, her hands gripping the wheel, her eyes scanning the dark horizon. Every shadow was a potential threat. Every flicker of light on the water, a patrol boat. Hours passed in agonizing slow motion. The Kausar 14 moved further into the strait, maintaining its sea trial pattern. The rain intensified, driven by a rising wind, turning the sea into a tumultuous, churning expanse of dark gray. The boat pitched and rolled, spray lashing the bridge windows. Inside, the tension was a living thing, thick and suffocating. Shirin ordered a comms check, feigning concern over the new engine's performance. The responses were rote, confirming their status back to base. They were still officially undetected. "Admiral," Amir, the young radar operator, called out, his voice tight. "Contact astern. Fast-moving. Identified as IRGC patrol vessel, Zulfikar class." A cold dread gripped Shirin. Had they been discovered? Already? "Battle stations," she commanded, her voice like steel. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Navigation. Full speed. Course 290. Maintain radio silence." The crew sprang into action, their movements swift and practiced. The Kausar 14,000 surged forward, the engines roaring. "Comms. Any incoming hails?" Shirin pressed. "Negative, Admiral. No hails. Keep scanning. What's their bearing?" "Closing fast, Admiral. Maintaining pursuit." They had been spotted. Shirin knew it. The sea trial charade was over. She considered her options. Engage? They were outnumbered, outgunned. The Zulfikar class was faster, heavily armed. Fight was suicide. They had to outrun them, gain enough distance for the transfer. "Mahmoud, get to the charges. Prepare for scuttling. Do not activate until my order." "Understood, Admiral." His voice crackled over the internal comms. The chase was on. The Kausar 14 Mars pushed its engines to their absolute limit, straining against the rough seas. The rain poured down, a solid sheet of water. The pursuing vessel was a persistent blip on the radar, refusing to be shaken. Shirin could almost feel their breath on her neck. "Distance to rendezvous point?" she barked at the navigator. 30 minutes, Admiral. At current speed. 30 minutes. Could they make it? A sudden, sharp jolt shook the Kausar 14 Amarn. "We've been hit," a crewman shouted. "Stern section. Minor damage, but structural integrity compromised." Shirin slammed her fist on the console. "Damage report. Keep us moving." "Engines intact, Admiral, but we're losing speed. Slowly." Panic flickered in the eyes of the younger crew. Shirin pushed it down, her own fear locked away. "Maintain discipline," she roared. "We do not yield." Just then, Amir yelled, "Incoming transmission, Admiral! From the Zulfikar!" They're hailing us! Commander Hassan demands we heave to, immediately. Shirin ignored it. Comms, prepare for EMP burst, she ordered. A desperate gamble. An electromagnetic pulse, generated by an old, jury-rigged device Mahmoud had prepared, designed to temporarily scramble nearby electronics. It was crude, unreliable, but it was their only chance. Execute on my mark. The Zulfikar continued to gain. Shirin could hear the faint, distorted crackle of their radio warnings. Mark, she yelled. A blinding flash, a sharp crackle, and then silence. The radar screen flickered erratically. The comms went dead. Did it work? She gasped. Radar offline, Admiral. Comms offline. Amir reported, his voice high with tension. EMP successful for now. The momentary confusion gave them precious seconds. The Kosar 14 pressed on, a ghost ship in the storm. Shirin knew the EMP would only delay the Zulfikar, not stop it, but it might buy them enough time for the transfer. Rendezvous point, 10 minutes, the navigator shouted. Target visual confirmed. Fishing trawler, bearing 275. Relief, sharp and overwhelming, flooded Shirin, but it was short-lived. Mahmoud, prepare transfer. All hands to the stern. The fishing vessel, a weather-beaten dhow, rose and fell on the churning waves, its single mast swaying wildly. Its deck light flickered, a beacon of hope. Mahmoud and the crew swiftly deployed the small inflatable transfer dinghy. The sea was raging, making the transfer treacherous. The Kosar 14 wands and the dhow bumped violently against each other. One by one, quick, move, Shirin yelled, directing the frantic, terrified crew. The young officers scrambled into the dinghy, clutching their meager belongings, their faces pale with terror. Shirin watched each of them, ensuring they made it safely. Her priority was them. Admiral, last one, Mahmoud shouted over the wind. Your turn. Shirin hesitated. She looked back at the bridge of the Kosar 14, her ship, the vessel that had been her life. She touched the tarnished locket again. This was it. Mahmoud, activate the charges, she commanded, her voice steady. 3 minutes after transfer. Admiral, you must come. Go, I will follow. Make sure the charges are set. Mahmoud jumped into the dinghy, his face etched with concern. Shirin then clambered down the rope ladder, the sea spray stinging her face. The dinghy was tossed violently, but the waiting hands of the fisherman's crew pulled her aboard the dhow. She felt the solid, familiar wood beneath her feet, the scent of fish nets and salt in the air. Cast off, she yelled, her voice raw. Full speed away. The dhow's small engine chugged, slowly pulling away from the Kosar 14 mile. They were barely 100 meters distant when a muffled boom ripped through the night. A plume of black smoke, then a geyser of water, erupted from the stern of the Kosar 14 Trows. The lights flickered, died. The patrol boat, her ship, began to list heavily, rapidly sinking into the turbulent depths. Shirin watched it go, a strange mix of sorrow and fierce triumph in her heart. She had kept her word. She had sunk her own ship. Moments later, the lights of the Zulfikar-class patrol boat reappeared on the horizon, its searchlight cutting a desperate path through the rain. It reached the sinking site too late. All it found was churning water, debris, and the dark, empty expanse of the sea. The small fishing dhow cut through the choppy waters, leaving the sinking Kosar 14 Moz and the enraged IRGC patrol boat behind. The rain continued to lash down, but now it felt cleansing, washing away the oppressive heat and the lingering stench of fear. Shirin stood on the cramped deck, the wind whipping her hair, the salt spray a sharp sting on her face. Her uniform, once a symbol of immense power, felt heavy and restrictive. The locket beneath her shirt was still there, but its weight was different now. No longer a burden of guilt, but a promise of a future. She looked at her companions, huddled together, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. Young Amir, the radar operator, was silently weeping, tears mixing with the rainwater on his cheeks. Captain Mahmoud, ever stoic, offered him a calloused hand, a silent gesture of comfort. They had done it. They had truly done it. The relief was a vast, open ocean swelling within Shirin, threatening to overwhelm her. The old fisherman, a gnarled, leathery man with eyes that held the wisdom of countless storms, navigated with a quiet competence. He spoke little, his focus absolute on the churning waters. His small cabin was redolent with the smell of old fish, brewing tea and wood smoke. Inside, He offered Shirin a steaming glass of chai. Its warmth spread through her, thawing the chill that had settled deep in her bones. She clutched it, her hands still trembling slightly. "You are safe now, Daryaban," the fisherman said, his voice raspy. "Omani waters are just ahead. They will not follow you there." Shirin simply nodded, unable to speak, her throat tight with emotion. The sense of profound, exhilarating freedom was almost unbearable. They had passed through the crucible. They were alive. As dawn broke, painting the eastern sky in hues of soft pink and bruised purple, the rain began to subside. The clouds parted, revealing a sliver of clear, pale blue sky. The air felt lighter, cleaner. Shirin leaned against the railing, watching the first rays of sunlight dance on the waves. The dhow was now moving through calmer waters. In the distance, a faint coastline began to emerge, low and hazy. Oman, a new shore, a new life. When the Omani Coast Guard vessel approached, a sleek, modern patrol boat, Shirin felt a momentary surge of apprehension. But then she remembered. She was no longer an enemy. She was a defector. She was a refugee. She was free. She raised her hands in a gesture of surrender, a gesture she had once scoffed at, but now embraced as an act of defiance. The Omani officers, polite and efficient, boarded the dhow. They spoke in calm, measured tones, offering water and blankets. Shirin, still in her drenched IRGC uniform, began to tell her story. It poured out of her, a dam breaking, the words tumbling over each other, a torrent of truth. The debriefings were long, exhausting affairs, conducted by Omani, and then later, UNHCR officials. Shirin recounted the horrors she had witnessed, the orders she had been forced to give, the system she had served, and ultimately, rejected. She spoke of the young girl on the trawler, her face etched with terror. She spoke of Zara, her daughter, her reason for breaking free. The silver locket, now removed from her neck, lay on the table between her and the officials, a silent witness. Her crew, one by one, shared their own testimonies, their stories corroborating hers, painting a grim picture of repression and fear. She felt a profound sense of relief with each word spoken, each detail shared. The burden, carried for so long, was slowly lifting. The guilt remained, a dull ache in her heart, but it was now accompanied by a nascent hope, a determination to make amends, to use her voice. Weeks later, Shirin was in a small, sparsely furnished apartment in Muscat, waiting for the asylum process, waiting for contact with Zara. The air conditioning was a constant, unfamiliar hum. The scent of frankincense from the nearby souk drifted through her open window. She had exchanged her uniform for simple civilian clothes, a loose tunic, comfortable trousers. She still touched her collarbone sometimes, instinctively reaching for the absent locket, a phantom weight. Finally, the video call came. Zara's face filled the screen, her eyes wide, a mixture of shock and overwhelming relief. "Mother, Mama, is it truly you?" Tears streamed down Shirin's face. "Yes, Jan, it is me." Her voice was thick with emotion. She saw the worry in Zara's eyes, the questions. They said you were a traitor, that you were gone. "I am not a traitor, Zara. I am a mother, and I am finally free." She explained everything, carefully, gently. The Mahi Gera, the girl, the unbearable truth. Zara listened, her face growing solemn, then resolute. "I understand, Mama. I always wondered." Shirin's new life was one of quiet solitude, a stark contrast to the rigid discipline of her past. She spent her days walking along the Corniche, watching the ships enter and leave the port, a familiar sight, but now viewed through different eyes. She volunteered at a local refugee center, helping new arrivals navigate the bewildering bureaucracy of a foreign land, offering them comfort, a listening ear. She wrote down her experiences, her regrets, her hopes. She wrote for Zara, for the 11 brave souls who had followed her, for the ghost of the girl on the trawler. The future remained uncertain. Asylum was not guaranteed. Her past as a high-ranking IRGC officer was a double-edged sword, a testament to her importance but also a mark of her former complicity. But she no longer feared. She had sunk her ship, not in a battle against an external enemy, but against the enemy within. She had chosen truth over loyalty, Humanity over ideology. She had chosen Zara. Would you have done the same? Tell me in the comments.